Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Dragonfly Paradigm Lunchtime Book Club. I can't believe we are already at Chapter 9 of What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. There's only one more chapter to go after this, so it's sure been quite the journey so far. This particular chapter, Chapter 9, is titled Relational Hunger in the Modern World. And I really don't think that there is a better way to describe the longing that we feel for real connection than the words relational hunger. It certainly brings up feelings of the genuine need to really engage and connect with others in a meaningful way, and how we really do not do that much these days. I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into that particular issue of connectedness and how both Dr. Perry and Oprah bring up on multiple pages in this chapter about the increasing use of screens and technology and how they have actually harmed our ability to connect genuinely with others. And through that, we're actually harming our ability to handle stressors and therefore reducing our capabilities of building our resilience. On page 255, Dr. Perry says that our ability as a people to tolerate stressors is diminishing because our connectedness is diminishing. He goes on to say on page 256 that we all need to get better at listening, regulating, and reflecting. This requires the capacity to forgive and to be patient. And mature human interactions involve efforts to understand people who are different from you. Could there be a better way to sum up the damage that lack of connection can do? I don't think so. I think we're witnessing this very phenomenon in our society right now. People are completely intolerant of anyone else who may disagree with them, have a different viewpoint, even just a small amount. But interacting with people seems to have become, an all or nothing venture. Either you're with me 100% or you're against me 100%. But that just isn't the way, as Dr. Perry puts it, mature human interactions work. In other words, we all need to grow up. I've said in earlier episodes that the lack of empathy in our society today is an issue that I feel is at the core of why we are struggling to come together during these challenging times. I really think that empathy should be required coursework for every student from kindergarten through college, because it's something that has to be worked at. And on page 256, Dr. Perry gives us a clear definition of what empathy is. He says that empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, both in an emotional sense, to feel a bit of what they may feel, but also in a cognitive sense, to see the situation from their perspective. Seeing a situation from someone else's point of view during an argument is not something to view as weak. It's a place to begin to build a bridge to common ground. Otherwise, you end up arguing with no resolution to be found. We see it all the time in the political landscape. One side wants X, the other side wants Y, and they argue until they exhaust themselves, never seeing that compromise is possible through taking the time to see each other's points of view, and concluding that option Z can rectify most, if not all, of the issues. Again, it's that all or nothing approach which ends up with nothing ever getting done and only more divisiveness. In the beginning of the chapter, Dr. Perry recounts his experiences in New Zealand learning from the indigenous peoples there and how they approach problems from a sense of wholeness instead of categorizing each type of problem as a separate entity. I think that's such an important takeaway from this chapter, that whatever issue or problem you may have that you want to address, it must be looked at through the lens of wholeness. You can't separate your mental health from your physical health. Your brain is part of your body. As Dr. Perry says on page 248, that the elders that he was interacting with kept trying to help him understand that the problems were all basically the same thing. The problems were all interconnected. And as he says so perfectly at the end of the first page on page 249, Western psychiatry likes to separate the issues, but that misses the true essence of the problem. They chase symptoms, not healing people. He continues on page 250 talking about how his approach to treating patients changed once he returned home. He realized that he had not been asking about the most important aspects of the children's lives that he was treating. How did they spend their time? Who were their friends? Where did they feel safe? This part was really important to me too, because it showed that even he was still learning the best ways to engage with his patients. As he said so wonderfully in his opening on page 247, when immersing himself in the indigenous people's culture in New Zealand, he said to himself, "What I could discover was profound, but what I would discover was on me. Would I let myself be open enough to truly learn?" That's just, again, as he said, quite profound and really an important bit to sit and think on. That sentence, or those couple of sentences, were my biggest takeaway, and the overall feeling from this chapter that I got is what I can discover, the possibilities of what's out there to learn is profound, but what I will discover is all on me. I have to be open enough to learn from those around me, to listen to others that are different from me with an open mind and an open heart. No one can do the work for me. I have to take an active role in my own healing and growth. And I think this can be the hardest part for some people to accept, that we have to do the work ourselves. Nothing is easy. On page 267, Dr. Perry says it quite well, that he's speaking in terms of society, but we are reactive. We prioritize convenient, short-term solutions. We are risk-averse, and we use material things rather than relationships as rewards, which, as he says, is a misguided practice. It's the result of developmentally ignorant, trauma-uninformed policies. He certainly pulls no punches with that. Essentially, he's saying that it's up to each and every individual to do the work and to not reach for those material things to try to self-soothe, because those effects always wear off. The shopping trip ends, the wine bottle gets empty, the plate of food disappears, but you'll still be left with the emotions. Those are still always going to be there, and it's only through the work that the trauma can begin to heal. So, I'm going to leave you with that gut punch of truth there. Sometimes the truth is hard to hear, but being open enough to hear it and be willing to learn from it is where the beginning of our healing journey starts. So, for that, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 9. I'm looking forward to the final chapter, Chapter 10, and to see how they wrap up this amazing book. So I will see you next week.